The security camera feed flickered on my phone at exactly 11:47 p.m. Ember thought I was asleep upstairs, but insomnia and suspicion make strange bedfellows. I'd been tinkering with our home security system for weeks, telling her it was because of break-ins in the neighborhood. Half-truth, really. The break-ins I was worried about were the ones happening to my marriage. "If you walk out that door, we are done," I called from the living room as she clicked down the hallway in those ridiculous heels she only wore for special occasions. Special occasions that apparently didn't include our anniversary last month. She paused at the front door, her hand on the brass knob we'd picked out together 12 years ago. For a moment, I thought she might turn around, might remember who we used to be. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and pulled the door open. "Then I guess we're done, Marlow." The door slammed with the finality of a judge's gavel. Through the window, I watched her hurry down our front walkway, her red dress bright against the October darkness. A silver sedan waited at the curb, engine running. Hayes Rellin's car. I'd memorized the license plate weeks ago. My phone buzzed with the audio feed from the microphone I'd installed near our driveway last Tuesday. Technology is a beautiful thing when you know how to use it. "Did he suspect anything?" Hayes's voice came through crystal clear. "Marlow? Please. He's too busy playing with his little gadgets to notice what's right in front of him." Ember's laugh was sharp, unfamiliar. "He actually thinks those cameras are for security. God, he's pathetic." "What about the house, the business?" "All mine after the divorce. His security company barely makes enough to keep the lights on. My real estate commissions have been carrying us for years." The sedan pulled away, leaving me alone with the truth I'd been avoiding for months. But here's the thing about truth. Once you stop running from it, it becomes a weapon. I scrolled through my contacts and found Beck number. Beck and I went back 15 years, back when we were both trying to make it in the tech world. He'd gone corporate, climbing the ladder at a cybersecurity firm. I'd gone small time, building a modest business, installing security systems for local businesses and paranoid homeowners. Different paths, same skill set. "Marlow, it's almost midnight, man. Time to roll tape, Beck, everything we discussed. You sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back." I looked around our living room, the family photos that had become lies, the furniture we'd picked out together, the life we'd built that was apparently just an illusion on her side. She walked out. Now I walk away. Send the packages. All of them? Every single one. I hung up and walked to my workshop in the basement. 3 monitors glowed in the darkness, displaying feeds from cameras Ember didn't know existed. The audio equipment hummed quietly, processing weeks of recorded conversations. File folders sat stacked on my workbench, each one labeled with a date and location. The folder marked October 15th Salted Anchor Bar contained photos of Ember and Hayes holding hands in a back booth. The September 28th Clifftop Hotel folder was thicker, with credit card receipts I'd pulled from her purse and time-stamped photos Beck had helped me take from the parking lot. But the crown jewel was the October 3rd Kitchen Conversation folder. Ember and her friend Cleo, talking about how to handle Marlow if he became a problem, how to claim emotional abuse if I contested the divorce, how to make sure I got nothing in the settlement. "He's so predictable," Ember had said, not knowing the new smoke detector above the kitchen island contained more than just a fire sensor. "Men like Marlow always roll over when you threaten their reputation. One word about abuse, and he'll sign whatever I put in front of him." I'd listened to that recording 17 times, each playback hardening something inside me that had been soft for too long. My computer chimed. Beck's message was simple. Packages delivered, electronic and physical copies sent to all targets. Audio files uploaded to secure server. "You sure you want to do this?" I typed back, "She made her choice. Now she lives with the consequences." The first package would reach Ember's parents by morning mail. Fina and Rowan Marin lived in the kind of old money house that came with a reputation to protect. They'd always thought I wasn't good enough for their daughter, but they valued propriety above all else. The envelope contained printed photos, audio transcripts, and a simple note. Ask your daughter where she spent the night. The second package was already in Hayes' wife Shay's email inbox. She seemed nice enough the few times I'd met her at community events. She deserved to know what her husband was doing during his late client meetings. The third package was the most important one. Copies of everything were now in a secure cloud server, ready to be deployed at my discretion. Insurance, Beck called it. I called it justice. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and started packing. Not everything, just enough to make a point. By the time Ember came home, she'd find the locks changed and a note on the kitchen counter. You walked out. Now I'm walking away. Check your email. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed once for 1 a.m. In 6 hours, Ember's carefully constructed world would start crumbling. She'd spent months planning her exit strategy, thinking she was so clever, so far ahead of her simple husband with his simple business and simple life. She was about to learn that simple doesn't mean stupid. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My phone started ringing at 6:23 a.m. Ember's ringtone, Sweet Caroline, by Neil Diamond, a song that used to make me smile. Now it just sounded like mockery. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her increasingly frantic messages while I drank coffee in my truck parked outside the Salted Anchor. Marlow, what the hell did you do? My parents are... Just call me back, we need to talk. The locks? Really? This is childish, even for you. Change them back right now. I know you're getting my messages. Pick up the phone. The fourth message was different, quieter, scared. Please, Marlow, whatever you think you know, we can work this out. Don't do this. Too late for that, Ember. About 6 months too late. Sal Martinez opened the bar at 7 a.m. sharp, same as he had every day for the past decade. The Salted Anchor wasn't much to look at. Weathered wood siding, neon signs that flickered more than they glowed, and a parking lot full of potholes. But it was the kind of place where people talked, and Sal heard everything. Marlow Trasker, he said, looking surprised as I walked through the door. Little early for you, isn't it? Couldn't sleep. Coffee and whatever gossip you're serving today. Sal poured coffee from a pot that had seen better decades and leaned against the bar. Funny you should ask about gossip. Heard some interesting things this morning. Seems like certain people in this town aren't who they pretend to be. Is that right? Got a call from Fina Marin about an hour ago. She was upset. Apparently someone sent her some very interesting photos of her daughter, with a man who isn't her husband. I sipped my coffee and tried to look surprised. No kidding. Then I get a text from my cousin Shay. You know Hayes Rellin? Married to that mortgage broker Hayes? Well, she's not married to him anymore, as of about 2 hours ago. Seems she got some very detailed evidence of his extracurricular activities. The coffee was terrible, but the conversation was perfect. In a town like Littleport, news traveled faster than wildfire. By noon, everyone would know. By evening, the story would have grown legs and started running marathons. That's terrible, I said. People should be more careful about their private lives. Absolutely. Privacy's important. Of course, when you stop caring about privacy yourself, well, Sal shrugged. Can't expect others to care about it for you. My phone buzzed with a text from Beck. Phase 2 complete. Check your email. I opened my secure email account and found a folder full of screenshots. Facebook posts, Instagram stories, text message conversations. Beck had been busy overnight, creating anonymous accounts and strategically sharing just enough information to get people talking. The genius was in the restraint. No explicit photos, no audio recordings, nothing that could be traced back to me directly. just enough breadcrumbs to lead people to the right conclusions. Marlow. Sal's voice cut through my concentration. You doing okay? You seem different today. Just tired, Sal. Long night. I bet. Word of advice from someone who's seen a lot of marriages come and go in this place? I looked up from my phone. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. Sometimes the people everyone underestimates turn out to be the ones you should have been watching all along. He walked away to serve another customer, leaving me alone with my coffee and my thoughts. Through the window, I could see Littleport waking up. People heading to work, kids waiting for school buses, the normal rhythm of a small town going about its business. Except today wasn't normal. Today, everything changed. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Ember. It was her mother. Marlow, we need to talk. Can you come to the house? Fina Marin's voice was ice cold, the same tone she'd used when telling me I wasn't good enough for her daughter at our wedding reception. 12 years later, I wondered if she still felt the same way. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Mrs. Marin. It wasn't a request. The line went quiet. I finished my coffee, left money on the bar, and headed for my truck. The Marin house sat on Cliff Road, overlooking the harbor. Old money, old family, old secrets. The kind of place where appearances mattered more than truth, until truth showed up with photographs and audio recordings. I parked in their circular driveway, behind Ember's BMW. She was here, probably crying on her mother's shoulder, trying to spin the story in her favor. Good luck with that. Rowan Marin answered the door. He was a tall man, thin and sharp-featured, with the kind of presence that came from generations of inherited authority. He'd never liked me, never thought I was worthy of his daughter. Today, for the first time, he looked at me with something approaching respect. Marlow, come in. The living room was exactly what you'd expect from people who trace their family back to the Mayflower. Antique furniture, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, Persian rugs that cost more than my truck. Ember sat on a cream-colored sofa, her eyes red from crying. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Fina stood by the fireplace holding a manila envelope. My manila envelope. Sit down, she said. I remained standing. I think I'll pass. These photos, Fina continued, pulling out the first image. Are they real? Why don't you ask your daughter? Ember looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Young, vulnerable, uncertain. Then, her expression hardened. You had no right. I had every right. I cut her off. You're my wife. We're my wife, until you decided to walk out. That's not what happened. Really? I pulled out my phone and opened the audio app, because I have a recording that says otherwise. The room went silent. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to pause. You recorded us? Ember's voice was barely a whisper. I recorded my own property, my own driveway, my own house. If you happen to say incriminating things in those locations, well, that's your problem. Rowan cleared his throat. What do you want, Marlow? I don't want anything. I'm just giving you the truth. What you do with it is up to you. I turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. Oh, and Ember? You might want to check your work email. I think your boss got some interesting information this morning, too. Her gasp followed me out the door. The Littleport Harvest Festival happened every October, transforming the town square into a maze of craft booths, food trucks, and small-town politics. I'd been helping set up the sound system for 3 years running, which meant I knew exactly how to access the main display screen that usually showed announcements and sponsor advertisements. Beck met me at my truck, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the kind of grin that meant trouble. You sure about this? He asked for the 5th time since I'd called him. She wanted everyone to know how pathetic I am. Let's give the people what they want. The festival was in full swing by noon. Half the town had turned out, including several people I recognized from Ember's real estate office and Hayes's mortgage company. Perfect audience for what I had planned. I spotted Ember near the apple cider booth, talking animatedly with her friend Cleo. She'd changed clothes since this morning, trading her designer outfit for jeans and a sweater, trying to look relatable, probably. Damage control. Hayes was harder to find, but I eventually spotted him lurking near the parking area, talking on his phone. His conversation looked heated, probably with his lawyer or what was left of his client base after this morning's revelations hit the local business community. Testing, testing. My voice echoed across the square as I stepped up to the microphone on the main stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to share something important with all of you. Conversations died as people turned toward the stage. I could see Ember pushing through the crowd, panic written across her face. Many of you know me. Marlow Trasker, owner of Trasker Security Systems. I've been part of this community for 15 years, married to Ember Marin Trasker for 12 of those years. Ember had almost reached the stage. Hayes was running now, abandoning his phone call. I've always believed in honesty, in transparency, in giving people the information they need to make good decisions. I nodded to Beck, who was positioned near the sound booth. The main display screen flickered, then came to life with a crystal-clear image. Ember and Hayes in the parking lot of the Clifftop Hotel, locked in an embrace that left no doubt about their relationship. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, the sound of cell phone cameras clicking. So, in the spirit of transparency, I continued, I thought you should know that my wife of 12 years has been having an affair with Hayes Rellin, a married man who handles mortgages for several families in this community. Marlow, stop! Ember had reached the stage, but the steps were blocked by festival volunteers who seemed suddenly very interested in maintaining crowd control. The screen changed to show a different image. Ember and Hayes at the salted anchor, holding hands across a table. Now, I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone, I said, though that was exactly what I was doing. I'm sharing it because I believe people have a right to know who they're doing business with, who they're trusting with their homes, their finances, their families. Hayes finally broke through the crowd and rushed the stage. He made it 3 steps before tripping over a conveniently placed extension cord. The crowd laughed as he went down hard, landing face first in a puddle of spilled apple cider. Careful there, Hayes, I said into the microphone. Wouldn't want you to get hurt. He struggled to his feet, covered in mud and cider, his expensive suit ruined. You can't do this. This is harassment. Actually, it's public service. See, I've been documenting my wife's activities for several weeks now, and I've discovered some very interesting things. The screen changed again, this time showing a transcript of the conversation I'd recorded in my kitchen. The crowd grew quieter as they read Ember's words about manipulating me, about claiming abuse, about taking everything in the divorce. Ember has been planning to leave me for months, I continued, but not before making sure she could destroy my reputation and take everything I've worked for. She and Hayes developed quite an elaborate plan. That's not true, Ember shouted, but her voice was lost in the crowd's murmur. The interesting thing about plans, I said, is that they only work when the other person doesn't know about them. I stepped away from the microphone and walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at Ember. She stared up at me with a mixture of rage and fear. You told me last night that I was too stupid to see what was right in front of me. You were wrong. I saw everything. I recorded everything. I documented everything. Marlow, please. You walked out on our marriage. Fine. But you don't get to walk away with my life. I turned back to the crowd, many of whom were still staring at the screen, reading the transcripts. I want everyone here to know that I will not be filing for divorce. Ember will be filing, because that was always her plan. But when she does, she'll be doing it as a documented adulterer who planned to commit fraud. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the children had stopped running around. I also want everyone to know that both Ember and Hayes have been sharing confidential client information, real estate records, financial data, personal details about families in this community, all of it documented, all of it recorded. That wasn't entirely true, but I'd learned enough from their conversations to make it sound convincing. Sometimes the truth needed a little help. So when you're deciding who to trust with your business, your homes, your families, I hope you'll keep this information in mind. I stepped away from the microphone and walked off the stage. The crowd parted to let me through, and I could hear the conversations starting behind me. Ember tried to follow me, but Cleo grabbed her arm. "Don't," I heard Cleo say. "You'll just make it worse." Hayes was still standing in the puddle, looking around desperately for support that wasn't coming. Several people I recognized as his clients were staring at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to anger. I made it to my truck without anyone trying to stop me. As I drove away, I could see the crowd gathering around the stage, everyone talking at once, cell phones out, the story already spreading beyond the festival grounds. Phase 3, complete. My phone buzzed with a text from Beck. "Holy hell, man. That was brutal." I texted back, "That was just the opening act." The Clifftop Hotel perched on the edge of town, like a vulture waiting for something to expire. It wasn't the kind of place tourists usually found, too expensive for casual visitors, too tacky for people with real money, but it was perfect for people who wanted privacy and didn't mind paying extra for it. I'd been watching the parking lot for 2 hours when Hayes' silver sedan finally pulled in. He looked terrible. His expensive suit from the festival had been replaced with wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that had seen better days. 3 days of public humiliation had taken their toll. Ember arrived 10 minutes later, driving a rental car. Her BMW had been repossessed that morning, along with her credit cards and bank access. Amazing how quickly financial institutions moved when they received documented evidence of fraud and adultery. Not that I'd provided that evidence directly, of course. Anonymous tips were such useful things. I waited until they'd been inside for 30 minutes before making my move. The hotel's security was laughable. A single camera at the front desk, no coverage of the parking lot or side entrances. I'd installed better systems in convenience stores. Room 237. I'd watched them go up the stairs, counted the windows, memorized the layout from my previous surveillance visits. Hayes had been using this room for 3 months, always paying cash, always using a fake name. The desk clerk was either blind or didn't care, probably both. The hallway was empty when I reached the second floor. Their voices carried through the thin door, angry, desperate, the sound of people whose world was collapsing around them. "Can't stay here forever," Ember was saying. "People are starting to recognize me everywhere I go." "What do you want me to do?" Hayes' voice was sharp with stress. "My wife took everything. My clients won't return my calls. That psycho husband of yours destroyed my life. He destroyed both our lives. We need to fight back." "With what?" "He has recordings, photographs, documentation of everything we did. My lawyer says I don't have a case." I pulled out my phone and started the recording app. Sometimes the best intelligence came from people who thought they were alone. "Then we make our own evidence," Ember said. "We say he threatened us, stalked us, made us fear for our safety. You want to lie to the police? I want to survive this, and if that means stretching the truth a little, then that's what we do." "Stretching the truth?" "Ember, he has recordings of us planning to frame him for abuse. How do we explain that?" "We say he edited them, took things out of context, made us sound worse than we are." I'd heard enough. I knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps that echoed down the hallway. The conversation inside stopped immediately. "Room service," I called out in a voice pitched higher than my normal tone. "We didn't order room service," Hayes called back. "Complimentary wine, sir, from management." I heard footsteps, then the chain lock being engaged. The door opened a crack and Hayes' eye appeared in the gap. "There's no wine," he started to say. Then his face went white as he recognized me. I pushed the door open hard, snapping the chain and sending Hayes stumbling backward. Ember was sitting on the bed, wearing a hotel bathrobe, her hair disheveled. "Hello, sweetheart," I said to my wife. "Nice place you picked, very classy." "Get out." Hayes had recovered enough to try asserting authority. "This is private property. I'll call the police." "Please do. I'd love to explain to them what you two have been discussing." I held up my phone, showing the recording app was still running. "You can't record us without permission." Ember stood up, clutching the bathrobe around herself. "Actually, I can. This is a one-party consent state, and I'm a party to this conversation now." Hayes looked confused. "What does he want?" "I want to make you an offer," I said, settling into the room's single chair. "A way out of this mess that doesn't involve lawyers or police or any more public humiliation." They exchanged glances. Hope flickered in Ember's eyes. "What kind of offer?" she asked. "Simple. You both leave town. Tonight. You don't come back. You don't contact anyone here. You don't try to salvage your reputations or your businesses. You just disappear. And if we do that, I stop releasing information. No more recordings, no more photographs, no more anonymous tips to your former clients and employers." "That's it?" Hayes sounded suspicious. "You just let us go?" "I let you run away. There's a difference." Ember sat back down on the bed, her shoulders sagging. "What about my parents? My friends? What about them? You think they want to see you after what you've put them through? Your mother hasn't returned your calls in 3 days. Cleo changed her phone number. Your real estate office is considering a lawsuit for the damage you've done to their reputation." "This is extortion," Hayes said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, this is mercy. Extortion would be demanding money. I'm offering you a chance to start over somewhere else, with whatever dignity you have left." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. "Of course, if you'd rather stay and fight this out in court, that's your choice. I have about 40 hours of audio recordings, 300 photographs, and a very detailed timeline of your activities. I also have documentation of Hayes' financial irregularities and Ember's client confidentiality violations." "What financial irregularities?" Hayes' voice was barely a whisper. "The ones where you used client information to make personal real estate investments. The ones where you steered clients toward properties that benefited your side business. The ones that constitute about 6 different types of fraud." I turned back to face them. Both looked like they'd been punched in the stomach. "How did you—" "I'm a security consultant, Hayes. I specialize in finding things people want to hide. Did you really think I'd limit myself to just following you around with a camera?" The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic on the coastal highway. "How long do we have?" Ember asked quietly. 24 hours. After that, I start making phone calls. The state attorney general, the real estate commission, the mortgage licensing board. People who take fraud very seriously. And if we leave, then you become someone else's problem." I walked to the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. "Oh, and Ember? The divorce papers are already filed. You'll be served wherever you end up. I'm keeping the house, the business, and everything else. You can keep whatever's left of your dignity." I left them sitting in that hotel room, staring at each other across the wreckage of their plans. By the time I reached my truck, I could hear them arguing again, their voices carrying through the thin walls. 24 hours. It would be interesting to see if they were smart enough to take the deal. They didn't take the deal. Instead, Hayes hired a lawyer from Portland, and Ember moved back in with her parents. They were going to fight, they announced to anyone who would listen. They were going to prove that I was the real villain, that I'd manipulated and stalked and harassed them into making mistakes. Fine by me. I'd been hoping they'd choose the hard way. The town square looked different at night. The festival booths were gone, leaving only empty spaces and scattered trash. The big display screen stood dark and silent, waiting for the next public event. Perfect for what I had planned. Beck arrived at midnight, carrying 2 duffel bags full of equipment. He'd been working overtime for the past week, setting up what he called the grand finale: cameras, microphones, wireless transmitters, and enough computing power to broadcast live to every social media platform simultaneously. "You sure about this?" he asked, same as always. They had their chance to leave quietly. They chose to stay and fight. This is going to end their lives in this town. They already ended their own lives. I'm just making sure everyone gets to watch. We worked in silence, installing equipment, testing connections, preparing for the morning. By 3 a.m., everything was ready. All I needed was for Ember and Hayes to show up. The anonymous text I'd sent them was simple. "Meet me at the town square at 10 a.m. Come alone. Last chance to settle this quietly." They wouldn't come alone, of course. They'd bring backup. Probably Hayes's lawyer, maybe Ember's parents, definitely anyone they could convince to support their version of events, which was exactly what I wanted. I spent the morning at home reviewing my files one last time. Everything was documented, cross-referenced, and backed up in multiple locations. The audio recordings were clear and unedited. The photographs were time-stamped and geotagged. The financial records spoke for themselves. Most importantly, I had the recording from their hotel room, where they'd discussed framing me for harassment and stalking. Their own words, their own plan to manufacture evidence and lie to authorities. At 9:45, I drove to the square and parked where everyone could see me. A small crowd had already gathered. Word of the meeting had spread, as I'd known it would. Littleport thrived on drama, and this was the biggest show in years. Ember arrived with her parents and 2 people I didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably, based on their expensive suits and briefcases. Hayes came separately, accompanied by his own legal team and what looked like a private investigator. I walked to the center of the square, where a temporary stage had been set up for the next weekend's concert series. The microphone was already live, connected to speakers that could be heard 3 blocks away. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice echoing across the square. "I know this is unusual, but I wanted to address some rumors that have been spreading about me." "This is harassment." Hayes's lawyer stepped forward. "My client has filed complaints with the police and the state attorney's office." "Really? That's interesting, because I have some complaints of my own." I nodded to Beck, who was positioned near the sound booth. The display screen came to life, showing a clear image of Hayes's financial records. Bank statements, investment documents, client files, all the evidence I'd been gathering for weeks. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing here is documentation of systematic fraud committed by Hayes Rellin over the past 2 years. He's been using confidential client information to make personal investments, steering customers toward properties that benefit his side business, and taking kickbacks from developers." "That's not true!" Hayes shouted, but his voice was lost as the crowd began murmuring. The screen changed to show Ember's real estate records. Client lists, property information, personal financial data that should have been confidential. And here we have evidence that Ember Marin Trasker has been sharing confidential client information with her lover, violating state privacy laws and professional ethics standards. "Stop this immediately!" One of Ember's lawyers was trying to reach the stage, but the crowd had grown larger and was pressing closer. "But the most interesting evidence," I continued, "is this recording from 3 days ago." The speakers crackled, then filled with the clear sound of Ember and Hayes planning to frame me for harassment. Their voices were unmistakable, their words damning. "We make our own evidence," Ember's recorded voice said. "We say he threatened us, stalked us, made us fear for our safety." The crowd's reaction was immediate and loud. Angry voices, people shouting questions, the sound of cell phones recording everything. "You edited that!" Ember had finally reached the stage. "You took it out of context." "Really? Let's hear some more context then." The recording continued, playing their entire conversation, including Hayes's concerns about lying to police, and Ember's casual dismissal of legal and ethical boundaries. "This is all fabricated." Hayes was trying to address the crowd directly, but people were turning away from him, their expressions ranging from disgust to anger. "If it's fabricated," I said into the microphone, "then I'm sure the state forensics lab will be able to prove that when they analyze the original files." I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see. "I'm sending copies of everything to the Attorney General's office right now. Audio files, financial records, photographs, timeline documentation. Let them decide what's real and what's not." The crowd was getting restless. Several people I recognized as Hayes's former clients were pushing toward the stage, shouting questions about their mortgages and investments. "I also want everyone to know," I continued, "that both Hayes and Ember have been planning this fraud for months. They've been manipulating people in this community, stealing confidential information, and plotting to destroy anyone who got in their way." "That's enough!" Fina Marin had somehow made it through the crowd. She stood at the base of the stage, looking up at me with pure hatred. "You've made your point, Marlow. Now stop this circus." "Have I made my point, Mrs. Marin? Because your daughter seems to think she can lie her way out of this." I looked directly at Ember, who was standing frozen near the edge of the stage. "You told me I was too stupid to see what was happening. You told Hayes I was pathetic, that I'd never figure out your plan. You were wrong about that, weren't you?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "You walked out of our marriage thinking you were so clever, so far ahead of your simple husband with his simple business. But here's the thing about simple people. We pay attention, we remember things, and we don't forgive betrayal." The crowd had grown to include most of the town square. People were streaming out of shops and offices, drawn by the commotion and the promise of drama. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the speakers. "Hayes is going to be investigated for fraud. Ember is going to lose her real estate license. They're both going to face civil lawsuits from the people they've hurt. And everyone in this town is going to know exactly who they really are." I stepped away from the microphone and walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at the crowd. "Questions?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of voices shouting at once, people demanding answers, former clients wanting to know if their information had been compromised. Hayes tried to run. He made it about 10 feet before being surrounded by angry customers. His lawyer was shouting something about rights and procedures, but nobody was listening. Ember stood alone on the stage, abandoned by everyone who had supposedly supported her. Her parents had melted back into the crowd. Her lawyers were huddled together, probably calculating how quickly they could withdraw from the case. "Marlow," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the crowd noise. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked older, smaller, defeated. The confident woman who had walked out of our house was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the consequences of her choices. "Please," she whispered. "Can we talk? Privately?" I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. "You had 12 years to talk to me privately, Ember. You chose to talk to Hayes instead." I walked off the stage and through the crowd, which parted to let me pass. Behind me, I could hear the chaos continuing, people shouting questions, Hayes's voice trying to explain himself, the general sound of a community that had been betrayed and wanted answers. My truck was parked just outside the square. As I climbed in, I could see the crowd still gathered around the stage, still demanding explanations that weren't coming. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through town. Past the Salted Anchor, where Sal was standing in the doorway watching the commotion. Past the real estate office where Ember used to work, now closed with a for lease sign in the window. Past the bank where Hayes had processed mortgages for half the families in Littleport. All of it would be different now. All of it would be better. My phone buzzed with a text from Beck. "Holy hell, man. That was incredible. You actually did it." I texted back. "She walked out. Now she walks away." The Salted Anchor was packed when I walked in that evening. Every seat taken, conversations buzzing with excitement, the energy of a community that had just witnessed something extraordinary. Sal saw me coming and had a beer waiting before I reached the bar. "On the house," he said with a grin, "for the best entertainment this town's seen in decades." The crowd noticed me, and conversations paused. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, just one person, then another, until the entire bar was applauding. I raised my beer in acknowledgement and found an empty stool at the end of the bar. "Marlow Trasker," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Jim Patterson, who owned the hardware store and had been one of Hayes's mortgage clients. "I want to thank you. That piece of garbage cost me $15,000 on a property deal that he said was a sure thing." "Sorry to hear that, Jim." "Don't be sorry, be proud. You did what the rest of us were too scared to do." Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. People thanking me, sharing their own stories about Hayes's questionable deals or Ember's unprofessional behavior. The picture that emerged was of two people who had been manipulating and cheating their way through the community for years. Around 10 o'clock, the crowd began to thin out. I was getting ready to leave when Sal approached with another beer. "This one's from the lady at table 6, he said, nodding toward a corner booth. I looked over and saw Hayes Rellin, Hayes's ex-wife, sitting alone with a glass of wine. She raised her glass in a small toast, and I walked over to join her. "I wanted to thank you," she said as I sat down, "for showing me who I was really married to. I'm sorry it happened this way." "Don't be. I suspected something was going on, but I could never prove it. You gave me the evidence I needed to protect myself." She sipped her wine and looked out the window toward the harbor. "He's gone, you know. Left town this afternoon with whatever he could fit in his car. His lawyer called and said he was dropping the case." "What about Ember?" "Last I heard, she was still at her parents' house. But word is they're putting it up for sale. Apparently, the scandal is too much for their social standing." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people who had been betrayed by the same pair of liars. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Keep running my business, fix what they broke, move on." "That simple?" "That's simple." She finished her wine and stood to leave. "Take care of yourself, Marlow. You're one of the good ones." After she left, I sat alone in the booth, watching the harbor lights reflect on the water. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages, reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering services, people from other towns who had heard about what happened. I ignored them all. The story was over. The truth was out. Justice had been served. My phone rang one more time. Ember's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Hello, Ember?" "Marlow." Her voice was different, smaller, defeated. "I'm leaving town tomorrow." "Good. I wanted to apologize. For everything." "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" I looked around the bar, at the people who had supported me, at the community that had rallied around the truth. "What do you want me to say, Ember? That I forgive you, that I understand, that we can be friends?" "I don't know. Something. Here's something. You walked out on our marriage thinking you were so much smarter than me. You planned to destroy my life, take everything I'd worked for, and leave me with nothing. You failed. I know. You failed because you underestimated the person you married. You saw what you wanted to see, a simple man with a simple business who would roll over when threatened. But you never really knew me. Marlow, I'm not finished. You and Hayes thought you were playing chess while I was playing checkers. But the truth is, I was playing a completely different game, one where honesty matters, where actions have consequences, where people who betray their community get exactly what they deserve. The line was quiet for a long moment. "I loved you," she said finally. "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. The safe choice, the reliable husband, the man who would support your ambitions and never question your methods. You never loved the real me. How do you know? Because if you had loved me, you never would have walked out that door. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, Littleport was settling into its normal evening rhythm. Lights coming on in houses, families gathering for dinner, the ordinary life of a small town that had just rid itself of two people who didn't belong. Sal approached with the check, but I waved him off. "This one's on me," I said, leaving money on the table, "for the best day I've had in years." I walked out into the October night, breathing in the salt air and the smell of autumn leaves. Tomorrow there would be cleanup, legal proceedings, insurance claims, the slow work of rebuilding trust in the community. But tonight, there was just the satisfaction of a job well done. My truck started on the first try, same as always, reliable, dependable, built to last. Like me. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I thought about the walkout clause Ember had triggered that night she left. She thought it meant the end of our marriage. What she didn't understand was that it meant the beginning of everything else. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clean, honest, mine. I sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the home I'd built, the business I'd created, the life I'd defended. All of it still here, still intact, still worth fighting for. Ember had walked out thinking she was walking toward something better. Instead, she'd walked away from the best thing she'd ever had. Her loss. I got out of the truck and headed for the front door, keys in hand, ready to start the next chapter of my life. Behind me, Littleport settled into sleep, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. Sometimes the people everyone underestimates turn out to be the ones you should have been watching all along. The walkout clause had been invoked. The game was over, and I had won.